Good evening and สวัสดีค่ะ Welcome to Thai PBS World Talk. As we approach the end of the year, it's time to recap the highlights of 2022 in Thailand. In November, Thailand is the hosting economy of APEC 2022 in Bangkok. Leaders of APEC were set to meet to discuss economic cooperation. It turned out, however, the Ukraine and Russia war was the dominant issue amidst rising concern over the global economy and its performance. International Monetary Fund Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva was in Thailand to attend APEC 2022 in Bangkok. She was also in Cambodia to attend ASEAN Summit and also in G20 in Bali, Indonesia. And then she came to Thailand. I asked her during her time in Bangkok about her key takeaways in attending the three meetings. Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, thank you very much for joining me and welcome to Bangkok.
Thank you.
This week must be very long for you. You joined ASEAN Summit in Cambodia, G20 in Indonesia, and now you are in APEC Summit in Bangkok. Can you tell me your key takeaways from this trip in Asia?
I'm very impressed by the leadership Asia has provided to the world. 3 summits, ASEAN, G20, APEC, one message. We have to work together. International cooperation matters. My appreciation goes for all 3 summits for focusing on the very complex economic environment for the world and on solutions that come from working together.
How do you sense whether the leaders are willing to work together really?
What I have seen in all 3 places is a recognition that we are in a highly complex global environment and that leaders must muster the political will to overcome the difficulties they face. And what are the signals? Very good meeting between President Biden and President Xi Jinping sends a powerful signal to the world of these 2 largest economies cooperating. Very extensive discussions on what are the key drivers of difficulty. COVID still affecting the world economy, war in Ukraine. And I want to express my admiration from the president of Indonesia, President Jokowi said, this war must end. And I can see that many in the room have been really in support of this message.
What about the message in APEC Summit? Because we all know that the war, Russian-Ukraine war, has become the main dominant focus in the 3 meetings. What's the atmosphere in APEC?
The APEC leaders have a high stake in overcoming the risks of fragmentation. Why? Because APEC is particularly significantly integrated and it has benefited from a global economy that functions on the basis of supply chains that link countries, don't divide them. What I heard in the discussions I just had was keen interest in the prospects for the world economy that are quite grim. We expect a global growth to go down to 2.7% next year from 3.4% this year. And this is after we were recovering from COVID in 21, reaching 6.1%. This abrupt slowdown is on everybody's mind. And leaders recognize that if we are to, each one of us try to go our own way, that would be devastating for their economies and their people.
From your IMF perspective, on capacity of IMF, what's the most concerning issue right now for you? The war, inflation, or COVID-19?
Well, the war and COVID-19 caused inflation. Why? Because COVID-19 interrupted supply chains and led to push on prices. And the war caused a food and energy price shock. Inflation is indeed top of mind concern. Why? Because it undermines the foundation for growth and it affects poor people most dramatically. So right now at the IMF, we strongly support the independence of central banks to fight inflation until we can see durable decrease in prices. At the same time, we are very mindful that fiscal policy still has to support the most vulnerable people and most vulnerable businesses. And therefore, we concentrate on how could that support be best targeted. Don't give it to rich people, give it only to those who need it the most.
In your remark in G20 meeting, you raised the red flag on protectionism. You warn that the world may be sleepwalking into poorer state. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is the indication that protectionism is raising its ugly head again. We see it with the introduction of trade and non-trade barriers. We see it with export restrictions. We see it in geopolitical terms being a drag on the world economy. We are very concerned that what has made us wealthier as a world may be taken away. If the world was to break into two blocks, just losses from trade restrictions would cost 1.5% of GDP. This is $1.4 trillion gone for no good reason. For Asia, the cost is even higher, over 3% of GDP, because Asia is so integrated. If we want to continue to build more prosperity for all people, we have to wake up and reverse these dangerous trends.
How can G20 leaders and APEC leaders do more in order to prevent the world from getting into global recession or into poorer stage?
First and foremost, leaders have the power to provide a good foundation for growth. Over the last decades, international cooperation and a more integrated world economy made the world's economy 3 times bigger. And who are the biggest beneficiaries? Emerging markets, developing economies. They quadrupled in this time. Just in APEC, that translates into 1.5 billion people lifted out of poverty. And this trend is now reversed. So ensuring 2 things. One, that countries have sound macroeconomic policies. They have buffers against shocks. They have transparent revenue raising and public spending that is sufficient. That is a must. 2, that countries work together. There is simply no path to prosperity without international cooperation.
You emphasize many times that the world has to work together, but can it be really implemented in real life, in practice?
Well, what I have seen in these 3 summits is a higher awareness that there has to be space for dialogue. Even if countries on some topics agree to disagree, they shouldn't disagree on everything. There are 3 areas that are paramount. Trade, because trade makes everybody benefit. Of course, we need to think about how the benefits of this trade are shared in societies. For quite some time, we didn't pay enough attention to the losers of globalization. That has to change. But don't throw the baby with the bathwater. And 2, what leaders must do is to drive that cooperation in the area of climate change. Otherwise, the world would be in a dangerous space of humanity risking extinction. This is an existential threat, cannot be addressed by countries working separately. 3 there are areas of global cooperation that are related to scientific discoveries being broadly shared. And we can do it. We saw it with the vaccines, how we collectively stopped COVID from killing people.
How does the competition between the US and China, especially in geopolitics and in many fronts of economy, worry you in terms of global economy?
It is important to recognize that competition is healthy. It drives countries to do better. But competition should not eliminate cooperation. We have seen for some time China and US having more tensions that in the end cost their people. For example, the tariffs that US imposed on Chinese goods actually led to high consumer prices and fed into what is today a high inflation. On the other hand, China is benefiting when there is that large market for its goods. Finding a way to separate objective reasons for competition, for example, the need to diversify supply chains. We have seen from COVID and from the war that interruption of supply chains when there is no backup affect the economy tremendously. So this is something objectively that needs to happen to secure supply diversity for the sake of functioning economy. But that should not lead to a pendulum that swings so far into contagion that in the end the world economy pays a price.
With the continuation of Russia-Ukraine war, how can the world economy sustain in this situation? Because right now the whole world is facing with the rising prices of fertilizer, inflation and energy crisis.
I want to say that we are particularly concerned about fertilizer prices and overall the issue of food security. Food security is not hit just by the war. It is also hit by climate events. And unless we concentrate on working to overcome, that would mean for hundreds of millions of people the pain of hunger. What I want to pass as a message is that the world needs peace. Ukraine needs peace. Russia needs peace. And the more the world leaders are united on that message, the higher is the chance that we would see an end of the war. Every war in human history ended on the negotiating table, at negotiations. Even the 100 Years' War ended with negotiations. The sooner there is an agreement to end the war, the better for everybody.
You are in Southeast Asia. What's the overall prospect of this region in the world economy right now?
Well, Southeast Asia is a bright spot on a very dark horizon. Growth of countries, the ASEAN economies, for example, is way above the global average this year, and it would be above the global average next year. But Southeast Asia is affected by the spillovers because when US, China, and the EU simultaneously slow down, we know that 40% of ASEAN export is to these three destinations that inevitably would hurt prospects here. What countries can do is, one, increase collaboration among themselves and trade links so they build more resilience on that basis. And two, I see high prospects of turning the climate crisis into an economic opportunity, as well as making digitalization a trampoline to higher productivity and growth in this part of the world.
The main agenda of Thailand as the hosting economy of APEC, Thailand pushed for Bangkok goals and BCG. How do you see that fit in with the future growth of the world economy?
It is wonderful because this is exactly the direction the world has to take. We need to recognize that biodiversity and climate, when they're healthy, this is good for everybody. When the development is inclusive, it is good for everyone. When we have open and connected economies, it is good for everyone. So I must say I was so happy to discuss with the Prime Minister how that agenda is a foundation for a better future for the world.
And as always, we look up at you to who is the woman leader and the world leader, and you always push for gender equality. So far, how do you think the world has accomplished in terms of gender equality?
Well, the story is not so great because during COVID, we have seen in many places a reversal of the trend towards gender equality. Women were the first to lose their jobs, the last to regain them. We have to recognize that for a society to prosper, it needs the talent of all its people, men and women. We at the IMF have taken this to heart. We have a new gender strategy to mainstream gender in our policy discussions with all our members and lift up the attention to the role of women. Here in Thailand, there has been progress, but there is still a long way to go. For example, women are still not on equal footing in business or on the boards of companies. But I see Thai women being so competent, energetic, and upbeat. I think this is going to change.
Thank you very much, Managing Director Georgieva, for joining me. ขอบคุณค่ะ
Thank you. Kapunka.
The IMF's managing director was really concerned with rising inflation, especially its effect on emerging economies, but he also supports the main agenda of APEC in Thailand on bio, circular and green economy or BCG model, in which she supports it's really crucial to fight against climate change crisis at this very juncture. And that's wrap up to the end of this episode of Thai PBS World Talk.